going to talk about basically biologics in dermatology. So I'm discussing advancement in dermatology, particularly focusing on biologic therapies and like things that really revolutionized the way that we are right now doing the treatment. I mean, it's a great time in dermatology. Like we have a lot of good tools. We have a lot of options for things that previously we didn't have. It's really a paradigm shift for us from conventional therapies to cutting edge. These are my disclosures and the program supported by Sun Pharma. The objectives is review of recent advancement, and I want to emphasize on role of internists and other healthcare ally and future potentials. These are FDA-approved biologics. The key biologics that are approved for dermatology conditions, anti-TNF, like adalimumab, we all know, like, Remicade and others, those are not new. IL-17s, also they have a good history in Canada, like secukinumab, and others are going to go in detail on those. IL-12/23 and IL-23 inhibitors like tildrakizumab, risankizumab, gazelkumab, these are relatively new. For psoriasis, we have 12 biologics approved. Now we have tons of also biosimilars. So sometimes even knowing their names gonna be like even like listing all is difficult. But for atopic dermatitis, right now we have 3 biologics, 2 JAK inhibitors approved, and now we have also topical JAK approved. For hidradenitis suppurativa, anti-TNF, Humira, and biosimilars, we have them approved for a while, but the new revolutionary thing is anti-IL-17. Secukinumab and bimekizumab approved, but not officially still we are able to prescribe. We can give it if patients fail the other options. Chronic urticaria, we have omalizumab, but there are others with different mechanisms are coming. For alopecia areata, vitiligo, prurigo nodularis, and pustular psoriasis, we have also new revolutionary treatments. Let's talk a bit about psoriasis. I'm not going to the detail. At the end, if we have time, I just go over some of the slides and photos. But what we have for psoriasis, anti-TNF, like I'm gonna go with the basically brand names because I feel like probably it's easier. So like everybody knows Enbrel, Remicade, Humira. Like we have also Cimzia, which is another anti-TNF. The characteristic of Cimzia is it doesn't pass through placenta. So it's the safest if we want to be 100% sure for pregnant women. Although for other biologics, we also have enough data. And basically the last conference I attended, the unanimous decision was they're all safe during pregnancy, not JAK inhibitors, but the biologics we use for psoriasis, we are comfortable with them. If we want to have precautions, like we can stop them in the last 3 months, not because of necessarily any harm to the baby. It's just if they want to go on the live vaccines after, like Rototec or TB or other live vaccines. We have infectious disease, Jessica here. So, I mean, the vaccines that they are live could be dangerous for baby, not necessarily because they cause harm for the baby. For anti-IL-12/23, we have Stelara, and now we have three biosimilars for Stelara, anti-IL-17, Cosentyx, Taltz, Siliq, and the newest kid in the block is bimekizumab, but it's been around for 2 years, and it's amazing. We have anti-IL-23s, Tremfya, Skyrizi, and Ilumya, and these honestly, anti-IL-17 and anti-IL-23s right now for me drugs to go. They're very effective to clear the skin, and we don't have as much of precautions as before. Like people dealt with anti-TNF, you know that we have a checklist. We have to make sure that patients don't have, for example, severe congestive heart failure, any history of MS. And also, we have to really, really be careful about TB, because TNF, it protects the granuloma, so anti-TNF can open it up. So TB could be really dangerous. Like in our patient population, we have to be very careful. And I had a lot of positive TB, and that was one of our main precautions with anti-TNF. When it comes to anti-IL-23, even in Europe for clinical trials, they did not require to do TB tests. With anti-IL-17s, it's a soft thing. We still, like in our latest journal, they said the only test that we need to do for these two is TB test, but still there is no data that they actually, there's any reactivation after these two, type of biologics. We have also oral agents for psoriasis. Otezla has been around for a while, but there are some generics form of it, and the Sotyktu, which has an interesting mechanism. So it's not JAK inhibitor, but it's on the range of JAK inhibitor. And there's no oral JAK inhibitor approved for psoriasis in Canada, but they are approved for psoriatic arthritis, like upadacitinib or tofacitinib. So they are approved for psoriatic arthritis, but we didn't find them very helpful for clearing the skin for psoriasis. Pustular psoriasis, we have anti-IL-36 and Spevigo or spezulimab. It's a magical drug. If you've ever seen pustular psoriasis, like these are sick patients. Like I just actually in the morning, I saw a patient that came, basically, like I saw actually her today, but she came a few months ago and she was so sick, she was so sick. And like honestly, with 1 or 2 injections, she cleared. It's a magical drug, but for the right patients. For atopic dermatitis, we have anti-IL-4/13. Dupixent has been around for more than 7 years right now in Canada. I have a lot of patients that I started 7 years ago, and they are still clear. We have anti-IL-13, Atralza and Ebglyss. We have JAK inhibitors. Again, it's really a paradigm shift. Rinvoq, Cibinqo. We have topical JAK inhibitor, Opzelura, that recently approved, and coming soon, we have OX40 ligand. Prurigo nodularis. It's a topic from my heart because a lot of our patients from chronic kidney disease, they end up with prurigo nodularis. It's a challenge in our patient population. Although these drugs are purely for prurigo nodularis primary form, not the secondary. However, I mean, no, actually, Dupixent covered for prurigo nodularis overall, like primary. But for our, patients with kidney conditions, I used a lot of Dupixent, and they cleared or almost cleared. And that was one of the main challenges I was facing prior to the approval of this drug for prurigo nodularis. A new drug is coming, nemolizumab. Again, the indication is not for the kidney patients, but mechanistically, these are safe. They are targeted. They don't pass through the kidney. And we are waiting for nemolizumab. So soon we're going to have that in our armamentarium. Topical JAK inhibitors just recently got approval, like we have it since the end of December. There are anecdotal, basically results on improvement of prurigo nodularis still off-label. We have indication for atopic dermatitis and vitiligo for this drug. And we have clinical trials of oral JAK inhibitors for prurigo nodularis. I used off-label, and in some of my patients was magical. But we cannot, like with oral JAKs, I'm very cautious in patients with chronic kidney conditions. We have to really give lower dose. And if patients have comorbidities, we have to be a bit careful, like cardiac, chance of blood clots. So for my elderly patients, I may not jump to the JAK inhibitors. Now we have also treatments for alopecia areata. I just saw 2 patients today and yesterday that they were like alopecia areata universalis. And, one of them actually, she's working in social media, like broadcasting. And she said even the fact that her just eyebrow grew back and her eyelashes made a big, huge difference. The stigma of skin diseases and the burden of it on patients' mental health is huge. Like people may think it's just hair, but it's not just hair for a young woman when they are completely bald. And the fact that we have now something to offer is huge. Olumiant or baricitinib and Litfulo, these are available. Well, all of them are FDA approved, but these 2 are available in Canada. Leqselvi or deroxacitinib is available in US. Xeljanz ortofositinib is another JAK inhibitor, older medication. We use it off-label for alopecia areata. The advantage is generic now, and it's much cheaper. There are studies in sick kids, they use Dupixent off-label, they check IgE level, and patients with higher IgE, maybe those are the ones that they may respond to Dupixent. It's interesting, Dupixent alone may cause alopecia areata too, because there are 2 types of alopecia areata. I'm not going to go to details, but that's also something I want to emphasize. Now we are playing with these biologics. We see also interesting reaction, like it's like yin yang, like T helper 1, T helper 2, we block one mechanism, people may flip to the other. Like I caused, atopic dermatitis in my patients with psoriasis, and the other way. My patients with atopic dermatitis, I treated them with JAK inhibitor, they got clear, then they developed psoriasis. So it's very interesting, these paradoxical effects and shifts. So we are learning more and more, and there are still a lot in the pipelines coming. And with Dupixent, I had a patient or 2 that actually they developed psoriasis after treatment. So they may develop other immune things, but we're going to go quickly over some of the monitoring and things that may happen. But in the context of this meeting, I just want to make you familiar with these names because, as an internist, you may have patients admitted to the hospital or there are emergency cases. So at least know what are these drugs, or at least what are the important, risks or monitoring things that we have to do. For vitiligo, again, we are so excited that now we have Opzelura. At least we have something to offer. There are clinical trials and off-label use for oral JAK inhibitors and also IL-15 antibodies. Alpha melanocyte is available in Europe for a while. In North America, it has another indication, but it is not easy. It has to be implanted under the skin, like surgically, and actually makes the color of skin 2-3 levels darker. Like a white person can look black when they put this, and it's very expensive. So yes, vitiligo is something that we are very excited now because at least we have something to offer after a long period of giving just protopic or steroid and light therapy. For HS, as I mentioned before, anti-TNF like Humira and biosimilars for it, about 10 years ago, there was a big wave, at least this disease came to the attention of everyone because of the new options we had. Now we have more than a decade of experience with this. Not like some people respond very well, but again, it's very important when to find these patients early and treat them as early as possible before the scarring happens. And the new indication, like for anti-IL-17, I have patients that I started them on Cosentyx and even bimekizumab. And honestly, to my surprise, the lesions melted. Like they really, really responded very well, despite they failed Humira. We had caution, like I was very cautious because a lot of patients with HS may have also IBD. Like it's more common to have compared to the normal population, like IBD in this patient population. And one of the issues that with anti-IL-17 we have to be careful is it may triggers IBD. So like if a patient has history of IBD, we generally don't give anti-IL-17. If they are stable, there are some of our colleagues, they still may give, but with really, really good monitoring. That's one of the issues with anti-IL-17 to keep in mind. For HS, there are clinical trials on topical and oral JAK, and there are small molecules and other treatments in horizon. Pemphigus, like we use off-label rituximab. In the last year, I had at least 3 patients with pretty bad pemphigus. And pemphigus, it's a dangerous disease. Many, many years ago, people would have died, before we had prednisone and immunosuppressant. And rituximab has its own issues, like we need a lot of monitoring. I was just actually talking to a group of rheumatologists, and 2 of my 3 patients that Hep B core antibody positive, and 1 had Strongyloides stercularis positive. So with rituximab, we do more monitoring. It's one of those biologics that we are not easy on monitoring, and I send a lot of them to infectious disease if I find anything positive in the results before starting rituximab. So about the next generation of the therapies, there are really a lot of innovations. As I said, it's a great time to practice dermatology, not from Health Canada's standpoint, not necessarily, but from what we have, what we can offer. It's a paradigm shift for us. We have a lot to offer now. And we are talking about personalized medicine, precision medicine, like targeted therapies, tailoring to individual genetic and biomarker profiles. Not necessarily we have biomarkers, they're really working on it, like tape stripping to see whether, like on tape stripping of lesions, like they find more like IL-17 or, more IL-23, but it's still, an ongoing, subject for the research. Sorry. Challenge and limitations is definitely cost and accessibility. For a lot of these treatments, patients have to fail the conventional therapies. There are debates. There are countries in Europe that the biologics are first line. But the cost may be different. Like the cost of biosimilar in Europe for Stelara, for example, is 150 euros. Here is very close to what we have as a brand name. And I don't know, I asked a group why it's happening. They said, can you explain why the price of, flights in Europe, like inside, Europe is so cheap compared to North America. Like, I don't have any explanation why the costs are different. But like I know, for example, in UK, biologics could be first line therapy. And it makes sense because, for example, methotrexate, like it's effective in 30% of our patients. And monitoring and long-term side effects and, not being safe during pregnancy, reproductive age, and when patients actually develop psoriatic arthritis, it's an add-on to the cost overall, like the financial cost for the system, for But the problem, and we have also a lot of, right now debates that starting the right treatment, choosing the right drug and biologic actually can prevent from progression to psoriatic arthritis and other comorbidities causing by this much of inflammation in the body, even like mental. A lot of patients with psoriasis, they have depression, anxiety, or atopic dermatitis, the same. But again, that's somehow out of our control. The prices are higher, despite now we have a lot of biosimilars, not necessarily their prices are cheap, like maybe 20, 30% less. There are side effects and long-term safety. As I said, with the new generation of biologics, we are really, really comfortable. They don't need even monitoring, for IL-17 or IL-23. Why do we do tests? Why do we do blood work? Because sometimes as a baseline, patients with psoriasis, for example, they are more prone to get lymphoma or, leukemia or other, malignancies. And if we don't do blood work, a lot of our patients, they don't have family doctor and nobody is following them. And of course, during my practice, I faced patients that they developed some of these, but not necessarily because of biologics. And TB, like again, it's a soft recommendation to check TB test once a year when patients are on biologics, because there were some seroconversion in the use of like certain, even IL-17 in elderly patients. But like honestly, in terms of infections, malignancy, the more and more we learn, the more and more we get comfortable. It may increase chance of upper respiratory tract infection, like the new, like anti-IL-17, 23, but the risk of serious infections, there's really no red flag. When it comes to infection checklist for anti-TNF, rituximab, JAK inhibitor, as I said, it's really important to do TB test, HIV, like Hep B, Hep C. Some of my colleagues, they don't do HIV, but again, there's this debate. If you don't do, maybe nobody else also does, So it's in my checklist, but sometimes I just do it as having a baseline. For JAK inhibitors, there is like it can increase chance of herpes, whether zoster or simplex, and that's a real thing. Like sometimes patients on JAK inhibitors may even develop eczema herpeticum, generalized herpes. So for patients, before even we start JAK inhibitors, our recommendation, even age 18 or 18-year-old and higher, to get Shingrix vaccine. JAK inhibitors, again, with TB, we have to be very careful. There are reports of patients that they actually developed, miliary TB or other serious TB in the context of JAK inhibitors, and they may decrease the immunity. For anti-IL-17, we have to be careful about IBD, and they may increase chance of candida infection or fungus infection. A lot of patients may develop thrush or sore throat caused by candida in anti-IL-17, especially the newest one, bimekizumab. I see, like they say 7, but maybe I see even a higher percentage in my patients on bimekizumab. IL-4 and 13, like Dupixent, IL-4 alone, there's no increased chance of infection. They don't need any monitoring. However, like from mechanism point of view for IL-4/13, they say it may increase chance of parasitic infection, but there are no reports in real world. And something that may come with IL-4/13, like Dupixent, cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. Again, the question is, was this a right diagnosis from the beginning? Because sometimes, like cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, we have to do multiple biopsies to confirm. So it's still not confirmed. And IL-4/13 also, there are 2 other things that may happen as side effect, like one facial eczema, like facial dermatitis, and one conjunctivitis. That's more common with Dupixent than the Ebglyss or Atralza, but sometimes it could be severe. The other thing with IL-4 13 Dupixent is arthralgia, and mild arthralgia may happen. So regarding patient-centered care and real-world impact, really new biologics are improving the quality of life for patients with chronic disabling skin conditions. And the satisfaction of patient is really high. Like their skin is clear. A lot of my patients, their feedback is, you gave my life back. I can now travel alone. I can go to the gym. Like things that they look normal for us, for them, like was a dream, like to go, for example, to wear a short or don't use a cap because their psoriasis was really bad or atopic dermatitis was really bad. Prurigo nodularis is really something that quite disabling. Patients are itchy, they cannot sleep, they have these nodules that they are unsightly. And as I said, there's a new drug coming, nemolizumab, but even with Dupixent, I had very good results. Dupixent, my experience is not working fast, so it may take longer, and it may not be 100%, but at least we have something to offer. Severe atopic dermatitis, like right now, like really, we have good drugs that make a huge difference. And for Dupixent is approved for 6 months old and older. So honestly, it's one of the safest drugs and we can use in a very young age. As I said, alopecia and vitiligo, also we have drugs that now we can offer. So the point is, like, we really need an interdisciplinary collaboration. So we have the growing collaboration between dermatologists and internists, especially with patients with these systemic conditions. And we already found some of our, colleagues to have that, collegial referrals and know each other, text each other. But with rheumatology, with GI, infectious disease, we really need to have a lot of collaboration. And with the HS, we also need to collaborate with plastic surgeons. And, they have also a lot of mental issues. And I wish we had good, social worker or psych on site to talk to them. They have a lot of issues. And a lot of the skin conditions, patients end up with mental issues. The role of internist is identifying dermatology conditions early and managing biologic therapy alongside the dermatology team, and be aware of specific reactions with the new generation. As I said, for example, chance of IBD, genetically prone, or Candida in IL-17, or others, like with JAK inhibitors and cardiac. I mean, with JAK inhibitors, the new generation, like we really are not as concerned about blood clots and cardiac. It's more with the older generation and high dose, like TOFA 10 milligram. But still there are potentials. And future directions in dermatology and biologics, there are ongoing research into the next wave of biologics. So we are very happy that maybe in future we can offer more. And as I said, we are learning more because there are a lot of patients that they really like walking on edge, like they switch between psoriasis and eczema with one therapy to the other until we find one that works for everything. Or sometimes we combine. Actually, I have patients that they are on combination of JAK inhibitor, for example, for eczema and IL-17 for their psoriasis. Now, we're going to have in future more precise immune modulations and precision medicine targeted for the patient need. And oral biologics are coming, like anti-IL-23 by Janssen, they're developing. So maybe in future, we can avoid some of injections. So new generation of biologics, overall, they have better safety, more efficacy. They have less frequent, like for example, for anti-IL-23s, like for Skyrizi and Ilumya is every 3 months. Imagine a patient with head-to-toe psoriasis. Now they get an injection once a season. They are clear. They are happy. They're over the moon. Like for patients that for many, many years they were on methotrexate and they still had significant amount of psoriasis. Now they really, like some of my patients come and say, give me that good drug, prescription. They're really happy. And they need less monitoring. Like with bimekizumab, it is anti-IL-17, also it's every 2 months. And the skin gets clear, their joints get better. Some of patients don't even know they have psoriatic arthritis. But when we start them on treatment, they come and say, no, I can move. No, I'm not stiff in the morning. So when we ask, they say, no, we don't have joints. We don't have problems. But when they get better, they realize they had it. So JAK inhibitors, again, we use Rinvoq, Cibinqo, Xeljanz, tofacitinib. There are more coming. JAKs are really big now in our field. We have to watch for cardiovascular malignancy, despite now we have more and more safety data for these two issues. Still a bit new in the history of this medication to come with a final judgment. We have to be careful with renal failure, serious infection. With advanced age, we are careful. Also, as I said, herpes could be an issue. Zoster, shingles, we may see it even at a younger age. Monitoring we do for JAK, CBC, lipid profile. It may increase cholesterol and changes the lipid profile. We will monitor for blood clot, liver function test. Another issue that also I see a lot with UPA and sometimes could be challenging in atopic dermatitis is acne. They may really get bad acne. There are new molecules coming. I'm not going to go to the detail of this for the sake of time, but that's the mechanisms of basically JAK inhibitors. A lot like we have JAK1, JAK2, JAK3. And we target different JAKs. Like, as I said, we also have TYK2, deucravacitinib, so TYK2. I mean, my experience was good, but not, I wasn't very impressed. It's an oral drug. So if people don't really want to go with injection, we are able to give Sotyktu. And also it has some indications for patients with lupus. So for patients with discoid lupus and psoriasis, or for patients that they have, they don't want to go for injection, and for palmoplantar psoriasis, I had good results with Sotyktu. We have like selective JAK3, ritlecitinib for alopecia areata. There are studies for vitiligo for that too. Selective JAK1 inhibitor like abrocitinib, Cibinqo, UPA. But it's interesting. JAK, we say non-selective like tofa, baricitinib, ruxolitinib. Delgocitinib is a cream coming for hand dermatitis soon. Delgocitinib, we say these are, for example, selective or non-selective, but when you give higher dose, sometimes they are not selective anymore, like they spill, so you may see some of the side effects that they happen like with non-selective ones. Again, these are like some FDA approved, like JAKs that we have available, tofa, baricitinib, UPA, abro, and ruxolitinib. There is black box warning for JAK inhibitor, heart attack, stroke, cancer, blood clot, serious infection, and death. But for Sotyktu, it doesn't have black box. So conclusion is the integration of biologics in dermatology has significantly improved outcomes for patients with chronic and severe skin conditions. And there's an ongoing research that promises even greater advances in future. So I finished my main. So if there's any question, please ask. And then I have some, photos that I can share. But the main is finished now, the main presentation. Any questions? No questions?
Thanks, Morya. That was a great update.
Yeah,
I'm sure the group would be interested in the photos on the specific cases. One question I did have is, given that you're a longitudinal care provider for some of these patients on biologics that clear, in general, are they all kind of committed to treatment indefinitely? Is there ever a test of withdrawal of biologic?
Very good question. Actually, in real world, like I attend a lot of meetings and like I was talking to a doctor from Spain, not even like a third world country, but he was saying that, because of the budget and not availability of these drugs to everyone, sometimes they use it on and off. Like they give it to patient and stop, and then like it comes back. And, a lot of patients, whether we want or we don't want, they do it. They don't do the treatment, and then when the comes back, they go back. Like for my patients with atopic dermatitis, that they have definitely some fluctuations in their response. Like, they get worse. For example, in winter time, they may use it on and off. There was a study about dupilumab. It showed overall patients that they, disrupt the treatment and go back, the chance of like the general, satisfaction of patients are lower, because then they get itchy, then they get symptomatic, then they go back to the treatment. But there was another study like for psoriasis many, many years ago. No matter what we give, like there is a good chance that if people stop the treatment, like 30% chance the psoriasis may not come back. But with the newer biologics, if it comes back, it may take longer, after a year or so. We don't recommend to stop and start again. With anti-TNF, we are always worried about antibodies, drug antibodies, that they may not respond the same. I mean, for a lot of newer biologics, they say there's no chance. Like when dupilumab came, they said there's no chance. Now we see that it shows that there are drug antibodies. Whether they are in practice and in, like the clinical situations, these are significant or not, I don't know. But I have patients that, like, a lot of these patients that they go on biologics, especially my patients on Dupixent, they were sent to me from emergency. They were admitted. They were very sick. Prior to these drugs, I had to give on and off cyclosporine, methotrexate, Cellcept, Myfortic, Imuran, you name it, and they were still not clear. So when patients basically experience this much of discomfort, they don't want to stop it. They are worried to death that their skin goes back to that condition. The patient I saw today that had pustular psoriasis, she has a little bit of just, dandruff right now on scalp. She's so worried. Like twice she went to emergency because she thinks that pustular psoriasis is coming back. So yes and no. Like there are times like still like people want to go for family planning, they stop it. We have studies that dupilumab during pregnancy, so far there's no signal shows safety, but as I said, these are relatively new drugs in the life of our therapeutic. But when we start, we say psoriasis is part of your body, part of your genetic. So there's no stop, the same as atopic dermatitis. But for a younger patient or with parents, when I'm counseling, I say, let's control this and then see in 1 or 2 years what we're going to decide. Because the significance of itch, when atopic dermatitis children, they're itchy, the whole family doesn't sleep. Like it affects the REM of sleep, it affects and even there are new studies that shows it affects their growth because they don't have enough REM, so that the growth factor is not releasing. So then, at the end, it's patient's choice, family choice. If they clear and they want to stop, which they do sometimes, that's their choice, but quite often it comes back because of the nature of the disease.
Maury, I see there's also a question in the chat from Tina Irwin. Do you find that recovery from infections can be slower when taking IL-23 inhibitor?
Oh, IL-23 inhibitors overall very safe with the infection. I mean, some people say they get more upper respiratory tract infection. Maybe. But I really, like, I don't even stop it, like I don't stop it if they get an infection. Previously, they were stopping like the biologics before like major surgeries, like for example, for IBD, there's no recommendation to stop this. So I don't think so.
Thank you.
So I'll go quickly. I mean, officially I'm done. It's just these are some pictures of different forms of psoriasis. Like it's very common to get in that intergluteal effect. Also, studies showed like a lot of people that they just have like genital itch, like especially for men's scrotum, it may be beginning of psoriasis. We have also good topicals that they're safe in these areas nowadays. This is a presentation of gutted psoriasis. Again, gutted psoriasis more common in children, but you can see in adult. And it's related to strep throat, so that's like a real thing. Nail psoriasis quite often may be misdiagnosed as fungus. You see the pitting, you see that oil drop and, onycholysis. And sometimes people may just come with a nail psoriasis. Again, scalp psoriasis, posterior auricular, it's a common area. Sometimes, like for rheumatologists, they may be suspicious of psoriatic arthritis, but they don't know. I recommend to check for these hidden areas behind the ear. Look at the inverse psoriasis, axillary area, genital area. And studies showed people with scalp psoriasis, genital psoriasis, nail psoriasis, they may be more prone to psoriatic arthritis. That's a picture of pustular psoriasis, generalized pustular psoriasis. And there's one main differential diagnosis, and that's called AJAP, acute generalized exanthemus pustulosis, which comes in the context of a drug medication. And these people, like if patient has previous history of psoriasis, more push us to generalized pustular psoriasis. If it is more like a drug, let's say a patient started terbinafine for fungus and developed a pustular rash, or certain antibiotics, could be acute generalized exanthemus pustulosis. And in this hospital, that was actually the very first patient I was sent for consult, So it was Rena Levinsky called me and said, please come and see. And I mean, at that time, even I didn't have any status with the hospital. So I went, and it was acute generalized exanthemus pustulosis. And interestingly, in drug safety clinic, actually, they confirmed with the testing. It was to an antibiotic. But pustular psoriasis is a medical emergency. They may get hypocalcemic, like, it may affect electrolyte, heart function. They are really sick. Again, this plantar pustular psoriasis or pustulosis may not be a clear psoriasis. It has other, factors and things, like people are generally smoker. It's one of our challenges. I had so far the best result, whether with Sotyktu or bimekizumab, but it's a challenge to treat. They have to stop smoking. That's plantar psoriasis. You see fissures. It can be quite painful. Again, palmoplantar psoriasis, could be very debilitating. This is rheumatoid type of psoriasis, very thick scale. I'd seen this like in my practice and many years ago in patients in the context of lithium therapy. But thanks God, they don't use lithium a lot. Lithium is one of the drugs that can trigger psoriasis. There are a lot of drugs that come in the list, beta blockers, lithium, even anti-malarial, even ACE inhibitor. There are alcohol can trigger psoriasis. So there are drugs that may trigger psoriasis as well, I mean, this is erythrodermic psoriasis, and if patients come with erythroderma that has a differential diagnosis, could be CTCL, could be eczema, could be other things, drug reactions. So we generally have to look at the history, do biopsy. This is inverse psoriasis. You see, it's very well demarcated, but you don't see scale because it's in the area that's generally moist. So you see under breast, in axillary area, groin area, like in the folds. And inverse psoriasis, now we have like a very good topical treatment for them, Zorif, but we may give steroid protopic, but in the folds, we have to be careful, or genital. We don't want to give potent steroid for a long time. And inverse psoriasis patients may have more chance of psoriatic arthritis. This is actually a picture of a patient admitted to our hospital many, many years ago with pustular psoriasis. You may not appreciate pustules, but it was kind of, you see the cross. This patient was very sick, a young man. He was on cyclosporin, but the reason I'm showing this, psoriasis in skin of color may look differently. You may appreciate some pustules, but they look darker, Sometimes I have even, like I have derm residents coming to a rotation with me, and it's interesting, despite their dermatology residents, sometimes they don't recognize psoriasis in skin of color. So global epidemiology of psoriasis is not uncommon. They say 1.5 to 5%, average 2 to 4%. In northern hemispheres higher, so it's a bit probably higher in Canada. So 70 patients per 100,000, they have psoriasis, equal between women and men. And as you see, moderate to severe psoriasis is almost 30% of patients, So, and those could be really affecting the quality of life. But even for the mild one, let's say somebody has psoriasis on face, just hands, that could be really, or genital, it can affect a person's well-being. Okay, now these are other pictures. This is a patient came to me, like I'm done with psoriasis. This is a patient came to me many years ago with this. And like you look, say maybe psoriasis, maybe eczema, maybe this, but that's the other side of body. This is actually mycosis fungoides, cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. I just brought it to show that not necessarily the early stages of CTCL are very straightforward. Like if you look at this, I had a derm resident that day, and he said, no, I know what they call it, mycosis fungoides. They look like fungus, like mushrooms. I mean, this patient died after a few years. Like I sent to Odette Center. They did all the treatments, but unfortunately, it was too advanced. These are some cases of calciphylaxis we're still seeing, but thanks God, now the rate of mortality is getting less. Early appreciation, if a patient comes, especially with chronic kidney condition on dialysis, with any painful nodule that's not going away, even if it's not ulcerated, send to us. This is patient after treated, so they got better. She's still on dialysis, she's alive. This is actually a fun picture. This lady came with this big, huge melanoma, but she was covering it with a Band-Aid, and she had a tanning boot in her home. And she was doing tanning boot so often. And she was completely in denial of this is a big melanoma. Oh, this is a patient with TN, Stevens-Johnson. I always end up my talks about like severe cutaneous drug reactions because, I think the awareness in our hospital is now higher. So people recognize it in early stage. Again, skin of color, you may not see the redness, you may not see the very obvious targetoid lesions. Like this lady actually came many months later to thank me. Her face was 1/3 of this size. So if you have any patient that you are like you are worried about drug reaction. If you see facial edema, it could be a sign of, drug reaction, early stages. So like, because sometimes it's not very straightforward for severe cutaneous adverse drug reaction. They may come with like urticaria, they may come with full prone like Steven Johnson, or they may come with very subtle maculopapular lesions. But if they have systemic symptoms, if they have involvement of mucous membrane, that's something to bring to our attention. I had 2 cases of severe erythema multiforme. Sorry, I forgot to put patients here. In the last month or so, but they were not sick. When I talk to an internist, ER doc, any doctor, if we say sick, when somebody is sick, But these patients didn't have like fever or high fever, no other symptoms, mild involvement of some they have pretty good involvement of the lips, but not generally the other mucous membrane. And these are mucositis and skin rash related to mycoplasma, Burkitt pneumonia. It may look very scary with those erythema multiforme, target lesions and involvement of the lip, but may not be Steven Johnson or TN. And in these 2 cases, they resolved. So severe cutaneous drug reaction, don't forget, there are like drugs, but not all the time we find the drugs. Like we say, satansep, sulfasalazine, allopurinol, tetracycline, anticonvulsant, carbamazepine, lamotrigine, and even NSAIDs. And honestly, a lot of this actually I've seen in the cases of Steven Johnson we have. And if you have any patient with severe drug reaction, time is a goal. Like we have to treat them quickly. So there are HLAs, and in our Scarborough patients, we have to be careful. Han Chinese, HLA B58, they can be tested before or cautiously. These patients, we have to monitor carbamazepine, HLA B15, and HIV, HLA B57. This is also another case from last year, pyoderma gangrenosum. This patient decided not to do any treatment except steroid, and I gave injection and cleared. That we use off-label spesolimab, the same drug that we use for pustular psoriasis, and it may help. For pustular psoriasis is 1 or 2 injections. The drug is $10,000. It's like rituximab. Right now, the company is giving compassionate. So we are lucky that our patients are getting it even if they don't have a drug plan. But it needs injection. So far was IV, but recently was approved for a subcutaneous injection. So these are the drugs. If a patient admitted to the hospital, is a challenge to get through formulary, because they have to go outside. Like hospital cannot provide spesolimab to pustular psoriasis or PG. And that was one of the cases that unfortunately Alexis knows, and unfortunately, like she was worse than this on her legs and she passed. These are pictures of my patients with, this is pemphigus, all her scalp, she grew all the hair back. This is also a case of bullous pemphigoid. It's another challenge. We don't have the IT drug for it. I have to give prednisone. And my Fortic, this patient was on dialysis, a lot of comorbidity. And one of my challenges is when I give high-dose prednisone, they need insulin. And Trajenta or gliptins, they actually may induce bullous pemphigoid. So we ask to stop those. So that's a challenge I really need for this patient, and access to internal medicine. This patient unfortunately passed due to side effects of the drugs. And this is a case of bullous vasculitis, hemorrhagic bullae. This patient did well. And this is a case of HS. Oh, and the last thing is resistant tinea. It's really, we see a lot right now in Scarborough population. And that's tinea indotinea. They may come with very, very extensive tinea. And they're resistant to terbinafine. So because of the abuse of it, probably in India, because mostly came from India, but now it's an epidemic we see in Caribbean, in Northern America. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Mari.
You're welcome. 1 minute for one more question.
Unless I see any hands, maybe I'll quickly ask so mentioning, difficulties when these drugs are not on formulary for patients admitted to SHN, is part of it also the step to get exceptional access? Like, is it through the EAP to get access?
Right now, spesolimab, it's still, they used to have a committee of cadet. Now they call it CDC. Um, like we had a drug that we were all hoping to get it, difelkefalin, for our uremic pruritus. Wasn't approved with cadet. Drug wasn't too expensive. So now, like, we don't have it, or there's no good access to it. We are hoping spesolimab get approval. We are hoping nemolizumab get approval. But even if they get approval, let's say a lot of biologics are approved and we can give it through EAP or others. But when it comes like to our emergency cases, it's a lot of paperwork. So we have to use it compassionate or through the company, and maybe later on we get approval for second dose. But for right now, Enbrel is in formulary. And when things are in Sunnybrook in formulary, our hospital can follow. So for Steven Johnson cases, we give 2 or 3 doses of Enbrel. Like we have like a formula, like ICU people are really now good at it, Enbrel, cyclosporin, methylprednisone, or others, Cyclosporin, sometimes they have resistance, which I think it's a life-saving in these cases, but IVIG, not enough, not enough data. But when something is approved in other hospitals, academic hospital, our pharmacy can get it. But like a lot of biologics, they are not available.
Great. Thanks again. And yeah, appreciate the interesting talk. Thanks everyone for coming.
Very much. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming. Bye.